As companies look to reopen after the wake of a global pandemic, we're starting to find that it's a good time to relook at your remote work policy. Some of the aspects that you adopted on a temporary, on-demand basis turns out they could actually be kept long-term and potentially change the way you operate your business. What we've discovered is the productivity loss that we were afraid of, the management, the interaction, we were still able to achieve those with technology tools such as Microsoft Teams. So what I want you to consider today is 5 reasons why to permanently adjust your remote work policy for your company. Maybe these will work for you. I think there's a lot of benefit to both you as an employer and to your employees. Let's take a look at the 5 reasons. First, we're looking at increased productivity. It turns out in a lot of situations, productivity went up and not down. That's because you can focus more, you can not have distractions as you're working throughout the day. We'll then look at how you can open up your recruiting prospects to applicants that are not just close to your office. We'll look at commercial real estate. Do you really need that big office anymore if you're so successful with a remote work policy? Maybe there's a way to change that. Then we'll look at things like the impact on traffic in cities. People don't like to commute, all just to get into an office, all just to be there, all just to be present. Do they need to do that every day? Can they do that only some of the days? Or can they just keep doing it at all? Think about how that has already seen tremendous impacts on the traffic that we see in cities. And finally, we'll talk about the work-life balance and giving employees back time with their families. My name is Corey Roth with DMI, and I'm going to share these tips with you today for you to make considerations about how you have a remote work policy for your business. When informally surveying a lot of people that weren't used to remote work, we found that many of them are actually reporting increased productivity instead of a decrease. That's interesting. It turns out for those new to remote work, they were finding that they had more time to focus. They could go to their meetings still, do teleconferencing tools like Microsoft Teams or Zoom. But then, when they were off the calls, they found they were less likely to get distracted from things that they used to get distracted with at work. We think about the time, we lose just being in the office sometimes. You get up to go to the restroom, and on the way you stop by the water cooler. Next thing you know, you're talking about sports ball and the latest show on Netflix. And while that camaraderie is good with your employees, we found that can be done virtually and it takes less time. I mean, you think about that as an employer when a group of 5 employees are sitting in the break room for 15 minutes, and while you're supposed to give them breaks, and it's good to give them breaks, you're paying for that time, right? So think about, are you really losing anything? So, while, you may have some other distractions at home, such as, your kids needing help with homework or somebody coming to the door, or something else, I think what you'll find is that since you're not constrained to working between set hours that you're actually in the office, you'll find that you have more time to get things done. Finding talent is hard. If you've ever been in a hiring process, it's a time-consuming, difficult process to find the best people for your roles, without a doubt. Yet, historically, what have we done? We've restricted ourselves to finding talent that are only available within, 30 minutes to an hour away from our office. And so you'd actually, pass on a candidate that lived in a different city even though they were more qualified for the job. And that makes no sense to me, especially if you live in a small market where you have, a relatively small talent pool. Why would you not want to open up your career recruiting prospects across the nation or across the world, right? Time zones can be an issue, but for the most part, a lot of these can be mitigated, at least if you're staying in a slightly larger geographic area, whether that's your country or, a few states away, as an example. And I've always found it ironic that the global giants in tech, the ones that make all this remote video conferencing software, these tools for people to communicate like no other, like the people in the tech industry who should be avid adopters of remote work, are actually the ones that are the most against it. I'm looking at you, Amazon, Microsoft, Google, game development firms in California like Electronic Arts, these companies absolutely insist your butt be in the seat every day, even though some of them make tools that let you, do your job from anywhere. So I've always found it kind of ironic. We'll see if some of these companies, will refrain from that. It turns out, I've loved to work at a lot of those different companies at different points in my career, and they've always insisted that I would have to relocate for the job. But, it turns out people don't necessarily want to live in Manhattan or Seattle or, Silicon Valley, right? People want to live where they want to live, right? So why not get the best talent you can get from wherever they are? And if they can do that job remotely and they can be effective, which we think they can, after all, you're hiring professionals, then let them work from wherever they want. So if you adopt a remote work policy and fewer employees are coming into the office, you're suddenly going to wonder why you're paying for such a large office space. You may not need to get rid of it entirely, but you may find that you need significantly less seats in that office. You may choose to adopt a model like consulting companies do, where most consultants are on site with the client, for example, but when they do come to the office, they use more of a hoteling concept where they basically just find any open seat, kind of like getting on a Southwest Airlines airplane, and they sit down and do their work from there. So I wouldn't want to be in the commercial real estate market in the next year. While some companies will go back to the norm, look at you like banking firms like Chase and insurance companies, things like that, I think some companies are going to adapt and wonder why they're spending so much money on commercial real estate, especially in high-cost cities such as Manhattan and London and places like that, where commercial real estate comes at quite the premium. If you're finding that you can get your job done without having people come into the office, or you can get by with a smaller footprint, why wouldn't you? I think this is a great opportunity now more than ever for co-working offices, right? And so you can just buy a subscription and use office space there on demand. So think about that as you're going into 2021 and 2022, right? Do you need to renew these leases? Do you need to keep all this real estate? And what can you get by with? I think there's a huge opportunity for cost savings when it comes to commercial real estate. Cities have always struggled to deal with the growing amount of traffic clogging the roadways. It turns out you just can't build highways big enough. You'll never be able to catch up under the status quo. In reality, the only real way to fix traffic problems Monday through Friday as people are going to work, coming home from work, is to reduce the number of people on the road. We see in cities like Seattle, one of the first cities to implement remote work with a lot of the employers such as Amazon and Microsoft, is that it immediately had a huge impact on the time it took for the remainder of people going into the office or to the workplace, such as people that are in the restaurant industry or people in retail that actually have to physically be present. The impact for them on getting to work was significant. Now all of a sudden, spending 45 to 60 minutes getting to work, you might spend 10 to 15 for those people. So if we can only keep essential people on the road, that's a huge impact you can make on the city. So how can we make this better? Well, if the larger companies actually implemented long-term remote work policies, companies like Microsoft, Google, Chase, you know, companies with large footprints in cities, if they all started, to have long-term remote work policies, whether it's every day of the week or some days of the week, I think we could see some significant impacts on reducing traffic during the week. In fact, I think cities should actually look at incentivizing employers for reducing traffic, tax credits, things like that. They could even go as far as, for cities that are causing, employers that are causing significant traffic, penalizing them, looking at more extreme measures to reduce traffic. Now, that seems a little bit extreme, but I think if we start with incentive programs and credits and things like that for larger employers that are making people come to work, then we could actually see a significant reduction in traffic across lots of cities in the long term. What's nice about that is by doing that, you're giving time back to your employees, and we'll start talking next about our work-life balance that we get through remote work. Now let's see how you can really do something for your employees in their work-life balance. So let's say we do keep this remote work policy long-term. That means employees aren't having to commute into the office every day. Let's take a conservative estimate. Let's do the math here. So if we have an employee that has a 30-minute commute each way, so 2 trips a day, for roughly 250 working days, assuming some PTO and things like that. That means each year that employee spends 250 hours traveling to work, going home. That's about 10.41 days per year. So if you tell your employee you don't have to go to work anymore and you can work from home, you're giving them 10 days of their life back. 10 days with their families. 10 days where they can do something else, be more productive, be happy, right? So let's continue with that math. Now let's say we have 1,000 employees, so a mid-sized company, and we take those 10.41 days. That means when you're making your employees come to work every day, that's 10,410 days that they're spending commuting every year. That's 28 years. Now, what value is there in that? Just so you can see them in person, have a butt in the seat? It's 28 years of time you're taking away from your employees, from their families, every year. If you want to look at things you could do for your employees to attract them, to keep them, you need to look at your remote work policy seriously, because what's going to happen is employees are going to start considering remote work into their compensation package. And they'll take positions that may pay less, have less benefits, but they might have better remote work policy. And that could be a huge either detractor or incentive to come to your company. Let's think about just even the simple things like gas, right? It's not uncommon for people to spend $200, $300, $400 in gas a month. Although nowadays, that may be less of an issue with gas prices being approximately $1.30. They won't stay there forever, right? So again, it's almost like giving your employee a pay raise just by having them not come into the office. Now, I'm not saying they don't ever have to not come in the office. You could have a nice mixture. You could have certain days that they come into the office. You could have completely remote work for some, and 2 or 3 days a week that they do or do not come in. You could stagger that with your employee groups and have, and handle it one group at a time. But there's a huge impact here. Give this time back to your employees. This is not productive time for you. You're not getting any benefit from it when they're sitting in the car, sitting in the train, going to work. You're getting nothing from it. And what you'll probably actually see is now the employees are going to spend that time doing other things. They may give some of that time to you without even you have to ask, because if they don't have to get up at 6 a.m. to get out the door by 7 a.m., they may just get up and start working at 7. And so you're getting faster responses, you're getting things a little bit quicker. It's all about giving more productive time back to your workers, whether that's time for you or time with their family. So think about that when you're about to turn off your remote work policy when we get out of this pandemic. Think about the impact that you've had on your employees already in the 2-3 months that we're at quarantine. We've already had a significant amount of time return to our families, to our friends, just to the employees themselves. So those have been 5 reasons why I think employers need to keep the remote work policy in place, at least in some form. What are your thoughts? We'd love to hear your feedback on how you see remote working for your companies, and how you see remote work potentially staying around after we get through this pandemic. Stay safe out there. This has been Corey Roth at DMI. Looking forward to hearing your feedback.